So yesterday we shared from Matthew. Let's see here. Let me scroll up and look at that. Matthew 22. Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself." That's in response to, in Matthew, Jesus is asked, "What's the greatest commandment?" Well, in the Luke version of this story, a teacher in religious law stood up to test Jesus and said, "What should I do? What do I have to do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says, because he knows the guy's an expert in law, he's like, "So what does the law of Moses say?" And the man's response is, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." Jesus says, "Right, do this and you will live." And I love the next little part of verse 29. The man wanted to justify his actions. The NIV says, "And the man, seeking to justify himself, asked Jesus, 'Who is my neighbor?'" So this guy obviously thinks like, "I'm killing it. I love the Lord my God with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength. And I'm loving my neighbor as myself as I understand my neighbor. Like, I'm going to prove like I love my neighbor." So he asked the question, "Who's my neighbor?" And then Jesus gives the story, gives the parable of the Good Samaritan. We're probably all familiar with that. And at the end of the story, it's the Samaritan who the Jews hated, who was the neighbor. What I love about the way Luke tells the story is the man says, or when Jesus says, "Who was the neighbor?" Right? Jesus tells the story, and then he flips it and he asks the teacher who had asked him the question, "Okay, so who's the neighbor?" The man can't even say Samaritan. He says the one who showed him mercy. Like, he can't even say it because he knows who the neighbor is. I think sometimes we ask that same question, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? Well, my neighbor is everyone. My neighbor is anyone and everyone that I come across. My neighbor is the person who needs my neighboring. In Matthew 25, there's another story that Jesus tells about how at the end of time, everyone is going to be separated. The sheep at his right and the goats to the left. And the determining factor is the way they cared for the least of these. The determining factor in who was on the right and who was on the left was how they cared for their neighbor. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. And the righteous ones were like, "Hey, when did we ever do that? Like, when did we ever see this? We never saw you in those situations." And the king says, "Well, when you did it to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. When you did it to your neighbor, which is everyone, you did it to me." And then as he goes through this story that he's telling, to the goats, he says, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was thirsty, you didn't give me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you didn't invite me into your home. When I was naked, you didn't clothe me. When I was sick and in prison, you didn't visit me. And the story's on repeat. When did we see you? And the king says, "I tell you the truth, when you refuse to help the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were refusing to help me." So who is my neighbor? Everyone is my neighbor. Everywhere is my neighborhood. And when I care for the people that are in my sphere of influence, whether at church, at school, at work, at home, in my neighborhood, when I'm at the grocery store, when I refuse to care for my neighbor, I am refusing to care for Jesus. I'm refusing to demonstrate the love of Jesus. And when I care for my neighbor, when I care for the people whom God has placed in front of me, when I care for the people who are in my sphere of influence, that I am caring for Jesus. I am loving my neighbor. That's what I want you to think about today. Who is my neighbor? Answer: everyone. Talk to you again soon.